My dear friend and former neighbor, the late Patricia Garfield, describes visitations from departed loved ones in dreams. Keep watching to learn more.
Book 3 in the new Thinking Aloud dialogue series is UFOs and UAP, Are We Really Alone? Now available on Amazon.
New Thinking Aloud is presented by the California Institute for Human Science, a fully accredited university offering distant learning graduate degrees that focus on mind, body, and spirit. The topics that we cover here. We are particularly excited to announce new degrees emphasizing parapsychology and the paranormal. Visit their website at cihs.edu. You can now download a free PDF copy of issue number 8 of the New Thinking Aloud magazine or order a beautiful printed copy. Go to newthinkingaloud.org.
Thinking Aloud. Conversations on the leading edge of knowledge and discovery with psychologist Jeffrey Mishlove.
Hello and welcome. I'm Jeffrey Mishlove. Our topic today is the dream messenger. We'll be looking at dreams that people have of their departed loved ones. With me is Dr. Patricia Garfield, who is a founding member, a co-founder, and currently president-elect of the Association for the Study of Dreams. Dr. Garfield is the author of a number of books about dreams and dreaming, including the bestseller Creative Dreaming, as well as Pathway to Ecstasy, Your Child's Dreams, Women's Bodies, Women's Dreams, The Healing Power of Dreams, and The Dream Messenger. Welcome, Patty.
Thank you, Jeffrey. It's a pleasure to be with you, always.
Yes, it's a pleasure to be with you again, too. You know, I think it was Freud who said that dreams are the royal road to the unconscious. Mm-hmm. Your book, The Dream Messenger, suggests that they may be the royal road to something perhaps vaster, more extensive, and more profound even than the unconscious. Perhaps the royal road to the realm of the afterlife.
Perhaps so. We really don't know, Jeffrey. That's, of course, death is one of the great mysteries of life. And we don't know exactly, and there's no way to prove where these dreams come from. We do know that people who have lost someone dear to them have a period of disturbed sleep and then very often intense, sometimes alarming dreams about the person who has died. Do they come from within? Are they some sort of psychological adjustment as we learn to cope with our grief? Or is there some kind of communication with forces beyond our present knowledge? Many of the people who have these dreams feel quite passionately that it's the latter. The important thing is, I think, that these dreams, wherever their source is, often can help heal us. They can bring us through a period of mourning. And even if the death may never, ever be forgotten, it helps us to see the loss in a new way. And sometimes the dream about the person who has died becomes a tremendous inspiration for the survivor.
Well, there's no question, I suppose, that everybody who loses somebody close is sooner or later going to have a dream about that person.
Almost certainly, yeah. It may not be right away, and sometimes, particularly when the death is very traumatic, in cases of violent deaths, of murders, of horrendous accidents, the whole situation is so painful the surviving person can barely even think about it consciously, let alone dream about it. And there may be a period of months, in some cases even years, where the person who has died is not dreamt about. It's almost a kind of protective phase, but gradually, sooner or later, and sometimes the very night of the death. It depends on the circumstances of the death and the relationship with the dreamer.
You have collected now well over 1,000 dreams that people have had of this type. And in fact, I'm one of the dreams that you report. Well, I had one of the dreams, and I can tell you it changed my life.
I wish you would describe that dream, Jeffrey, because it's a very powerful one, and it's a great example of what such dreams can mean to people.
Well, okay, I had a dream in which my great Uncle Harry appeared to me. This was back in 1972. I was a young man, and I hadn't seen my Uncle Harry for many, many years, well over a decade. But he came to me in this dream, and he spoke to me deeply about my life. And using, even though he was an Orthodox Jewish man, in the dream he was using the symbolism of the Chinese yin-yang. And when I awoke from the dream, I was in a state of consciousness that I have never been in either before or since. I was singing and crying at the same time. I was singing an old Jewish melody, which is a very profound song, Avinu Malkeinu.
What does it mean, Jeffrey?
It means, our Father, our King, have mercy upon us, even though we may not deserve it. And it is a song that's sung in the Jewish ritual on Yom Kippur, which is the most sacred day of the year.
Yes.
And it's truly one of the most intense moments of the Jewish liturgy. But I had been far away from that and had long forgotten all of that. And after I had that dream, I wrote home to my parents and said, "How's Uncle Harry? I had a dream about him." And 3 days later, my mother was on the phone and said, "How did you know Uncle Harry had just died?"
Yeah.
That dream impressed me.
And the dream
in a very,
was
very strong
the
way.
night of his death?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
As best I can figure out, it was what I subsequently devoted my whole career to exploring these.
I hoped you were going to tell that part.
Sorts of parapsychological events. I ended up getting a doctoral degree in parapsychology after that. And one of the things I learned is that back in the 19th century, researchers then reported that the most common spontaneous psychic experience that they noted is what they called the crisis apparition, which is exactly this sort of thing. When it occurs to you, you think you're the only one.
But when that happens to you, nobody could convince you it doesn't occur. It's not true, that it's some kind of made-up thing, which sometimes happen. People look back on such dreams, they hear anecdotes and say, they probably saw Uncle Harry and he was looking sick or something. There was some subliminal cues, but you hadn't been in touch with him at all, and you had no reason to think he was ill. And yet you had some sort of communication, either simultaneously or very close to the fact of his death. And this contact, wherever it comes from, this contact affected your life. And you felt supported in your choice of career, which was a very unusual one at that time. I think you were the first, were you not?
First, and as of this point in time, still only.
Oh my goodness.
But more than that, I can look back now some 25 years after the event. Well, most dreams fade after 25 years. This one, in a way, has become stronger. It's realer than real. If Uncle Harry had actually appeared.
Words that many of these people use describing those dreams, it's more real.
More real.
Than reality.
It's as if this physical reality is a shadow play compared to that spiritual reality.
Yes, and the symbols that occurred in your dream are very interesting, in that every religion has particular practices that one can use and fall back on that are helpful in a period of bereavement. Not all of us use them, but they're there in every form of religion.
Yeah.
And in your case, it was calling on something of your past that wasn't currently active,
Not at all.
but reached very deep into yourself. And also this very ancient Chinese symbol that, you know, is as ancient, or I don't know, perhaps more so than the Jewish religion, and even farther back symbol, which talks about the balance between the dark and the light. And you could look at that as between life and death.
Yes.
So some part of you was in contact with this deep energy, this deep history of our ancestors that helped and guided and supported you at a moment of need, and helped lead you into a path that you were hesitant about, and yet has really been your career.
That's true. And as I read your book, I see that there are, I suppose fundamentally to me, two different kinds of dreams that people have with regard to their loved ones, their departed ones. One kind, I would say, are dreams that help us through our own personal grieving, working out our own psychological issues. Very important. But the other kinds of dreams are those in which the dream feels more like a gift from another world, and that gift comes through in ways that manifest in poetry and drama and literature and in life-changing decisions.
That was one of the things that most struck me in the process of writing this book, is that there was, for many people, a change in the pattern of the dreams about the person who had died. That many times the early dreams were exceedingly painful, replays of the event, seeing the loved one suffering again, showing symptoms of the illness, this sort of very difficult to witness, or the traumatic event, seeing the person going through it, even if they hadn't seen it, but visualizing it and suffering with them. But over time, the dreams change, and they become first perhaps related to life. What shall I do about so-and-so? Is it all right to do so? Should I sell the house? Is it all right to date again? This kind of questioning that people have when they've lost someone, it feels like almost being unfaithful to the person who died, to go on with life. And dreams about the person who's died, what the person who has died I call the dream messenger. Dreams about the dream messenger at first say, it's okay, yes, it's all right to sell the house. Of course, you can go out again. It's okay. There's a kind of get on with your life feeling. But then for some people there is this tremendously life-changing dream. And you had one of this nature. One of the women that I worked with had a very powerful dream of the same sort, in which she'd had many dreams about her mother since her death, but they were more practical matters. And in this most profound dream, her mother appeared to her while she, the dreamer, was working in the garden, and said something to the effect of, I won't be able to come back anymore. This is, the last time. And I want to know, what is your heart's desire? And the young woman said, without missing a beat, she knew it was a good education. She wanted that more than anything. And she felt she was able to communicate that to her mother. And that the dream made such an impression on her that, immediately she stopped what she was doing to the extent that she was able and turned her attention to focusing on fulfilling this thing that her mother's question had made clear to her what she wanted. And even though she was, at that point, a single parent, and she had to work 2 jobs to take classes, the impetus and the inspiration that such dreams have can carry us through that, as it did with her. And she eventually achieved her goal, graduated well, got a good job, is very, very pleased with her life at this stage, and feels that it came from this dream.
You even point out that sometimes the dream messenger, the departed loved one, is disapproving, and that can be a growth process.
Yes, it can be. This can happen in a couple of ways, Jeffrey. One is where the message seems to be, how could you do that to me? One woman whose mom had died, and the night of the funeral, she and her siblings went through the belongings and divided them. That night, she had a dream in which her mother was very angry with her and was berating her for, carrying out this task too soon and without enough feeling. And this particular person had a lot of conflict with her mother. So it took time to shift, but it did eventually. Another man who had a very angry dream of his grandmother, who appeared sort of out of the sky and said, he saw her face very large, and she said, "Why are you crucifying my son?" And he woke up in sort of terror. He felt as if he'd had this visit from the other world. And that dream, although it was a frightening dream, it caused him to think about his relationship with his father, that he had cut off, that he had distanced himself from his father and never allowed his father to have a chance to relate to him. And that dream made him begin to ask questions of his family and to explore and eventually get together with his father, who at that point had become ill and was hospitalized. And he was able to resolve the relationship and come to an understanding before his father's death, but based on a very negative dream. Sometimes the harsh messages are warnings. Don't do that. Don't carry that out. This is dangerous. You don't want to do this. And I think we need to listen very carefully to the messages we get in such dreams and consider. Sometimes it's just the same old tape replaying. You always argued with this person, and here you are, 9 years later, maybe still carrying on the same old fuss. But when they are very specific messages related to a specific incident, whether it's in fact the spirit of that person warning you, or whether it's your own internal intuition saying, don't do that, that's risky, but it takes the form and the shape of the person who's died. It almost doesn't matter. The information is there, and it helps us to make better decisions about our own lives. And to do things, I think, Jeffrey, most importantly, to do things in our lives that will leave for others when we're gone, which, the wheel keeps turning, that is our kind of gift to them. Because each person who's died, there's something, whether it was your uncle, was probably a person that you felt cared about you a great deal and would want to be giving to you. What is it that we want to keep in our lives from the person who died? That's important to think about too.
Well, it's interesting to think that in most cultures around the world, there is a sense of, I think, continuity from generation to generation, reverence of the ancestors. And probably in modern Western society, we've lost a lot of that.
It's true that unless we follow some particular tradition that does consider those who have died before us, it's difficult in the modern world to help ourselves move through a period of great distress and to maintain that connection. Because at first, all you feel is the pain. Yeah. There's basically 3 stages to bereavement. A period of numbness that can last more or less long, but it's that period where one feels things are unreal and almost you don't feel anything. Yeah. Many people say, I don't know who was at the funeral. I don't know what they said to me. It's a blank. And this is a kind of protective mechanism that we use psychologically.
Because the person is traumatized.
Yes, the trauma and the shock or the pain is just too much and you kind of go dead for a while. But then the feelings begin to come back and these can be extremely painful. It's what's called the period of disorganization. So first you're numb, but then you begin to have all of this wild stuff going on.
When you recover from numbness, you're disorganized.
Absolutely, and people often say, I think I'm going crazy. Because they're okay one minute, they're fine, they're going along, and something will hit them, and they start weeping, or they become irrationally angry. They feel sort of nutty because they have not the usual control over their emotions. And when there's been a violent death, of course, there's all kinds of other feelings involved. People who have survived someone in the family who's committed suicide, there's often a lot of guilt and anger. How could he do this to me? One woman talked about her brother committing suicide and she had a miscarriage and she felt great anger toward him for disrupting this important part of her life, and at the same time guilty to feel angry. So there's this great turmoil of feelings, and of course sadness being a major component usually. But this is followed by a period of reorganization where one begins, and it doesn't just click on and the other one click off. It goes back and forth over time, but gradually becomes established a period of reorganization where one accepts the reality of the loss. One has allowed oneself to feel all the emotions. It's not good for you to just freeze them. And people say, oh, you're doing so well. And, very often when people don't let themselves feel the emotions that they're having, years later, the death is extremely troublesome. So you've accepted the reality of the loss, you've allowed yourself to feel the feelings, and you begin the process of having a life in which the loved person is absent. And of course this requires a whole new adjustment, and one has to learn some new skills and make new relationships. And it doesn't mean that you're being unfaithful or that you're going to forget the loved one, but they become part of your history and part of your life that was very important. But you become eventually, if you're lucky, able to reinvest your emotions in other relationships and in other activities.
And this whole process, I assume, probably runs a few years.
It certainly can. And it's, people think maybe the first year it's over with, you know, and in the Victorian era there were all of these rules about, you know, first you wear dull black and then you wear shiny black and then you can kind of graduate to dark purple and a gray half mourning, it was called, and then, you know, gradually get back into wearing color. But it's not that simple, and it's not, there's no one pattern. Each person grieves in their own way and at their own rate, and you have to be very patient with yourself and with people who are in grief to help them take their time and move at their pace.
One of the things that you seem to encourage people is to deliberately work with their dreams and helping them through the grieving process.
Absolutely. These three processes of, you know, phases, so to speak, of grief that we just mentioned are ones that are paralleled in our dream state, so that they help us with these tasks of grief. And ultimately, each dream about the person who's died is healing. That is, even the very tragic ones. A widow whose husband was killed in an industrial accident by having his chest crushed, you know, in his middle 30s, had terrible dreams about him that were so frightening to her that she stopped dreaming about him altogether and began to dream of a fish caught on a hook. And I was trying to help her understand this dream and asked her, what's a fish? You know, suppose I didn't know, I was a little child, what would you say? And she said, well, a fish is a creature who can't breathe out of water. I said, what? She said, that's the last thing he said to me before he died. I can't breathe. You know, and the fish had become the symbol for her husband with his, you know, crushed chest. Even those terrible dreams, if you allow yourself to look at them and not just try to escape them with sleeping pills or staying awake or various other avoidance things, they're terribly painful, but they do begin the process of incorporating, this person died, it was a terrible death, it makes me miserable, but then eventually one makes the contact that is teaching and helping and guiding.
So I suppose ultimately coping with death of other people and coming to terms with our own inevitable death it's part of the human dilemma. It's something no person can avoid.
That's certainly the case, and as much as we might like to, you know, we have to face that too. And we need to be able to help those who are going through this. We need to know how to get some help for ourselves when we go through it inevitably. If we survive, then we will be suffering from the loss of others. So I hope that the Dream Messenger is one such item that will help guide people through this process.
Patty Garfield, thanks so much for being with me. It's been a pleasure. And thank you for being with us. And please check your station listings for part 2 of our 2-part series on the Dream Messenger.
Book 3 in the new Thinking Aloud dialogue series is UFOs and UAP, Are We Really Alone? Now available on Amazon.
New Thinking Aloud is presented by the California Institute for Human Science, a fully accredited university offering distant learning graduate degrees that focus on mind, body, and spirit. The topics that we cover here. We are particularly excited to announce new degrees emphasizing parapsychology and the paranormal. Visit their website at cihs.edu. You can now download a free PDF copy of issue number 8 of the New Thinking Aloud magazine or order a beautiful printed copy, go to newthinkingaloud.org.